Welcome to the Real-Time Visual Effects Podcast, the place to hear from some of the video game industry's most seasoned artists and up your game. Listen in on how you can learn and grow as a VFX artist, discover your own wizard, and network with hundreds of other talented magicians in the real-time visual effects community. Here is your host, Travis McCallum.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Real-Time Visual Effects Podcast. Today we are having our first roundtable discussion, how to get your first job in the visual effects industry. Joining us in this roundtable discussion, we have Andreas Glad, Julian Love, Shannon McSheehan, Ashley Lyons, and a special guest, Mr. Spencer Liles. I want to give all of our guests a chance to introduce themselves. So Shannon, why don't you tell us who you are?
Hello, I am Shannon McSheehan. I am the VFX lead for R&D at Riot Games. I've been at Riot for almost 8 years now and still loving it.
Yes, my name is Julian Love. I am no longer a VFX artist, actually, by title. I am a senior combat designer working on Diablo Immortal. I've been at Blizzard for 18 years, going on 19 this summer. And prior to being a designer, I was the tech art VFX lead for Diablo 3 for the entirety of its production.
Andreas?
That's me. And apparently I'm the studio hopper of the group. I've been a VFX artist for 13 years, I think, but I've been at like 6 studios right now. I think I'm done hopping around. I am a VFX artist at Embark, and this is absolutely fantastic. In the past, I've done stuff like working on Battlefield at DICE, working on big stuff at Ubisoft, all secret and cool. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hi, I am Ashley Lyons. I am the VFX lead at Gearbox Software. I've been there just a little over 7 years. Like I just hit my 7-year mark. I've been VFX artist for about 10 years now, a little bit over a decade.
And last but not least, Mr. Spencer.
Hey everybody, I'm Spencer Liles. I'm an ADR, audio engineer, prelay engineer, and also do post-mixing as well. And Andreas, you're not the only studio hopper. I also, until recently, I've been a vagabond jumping around different studios all over DFW the past couple of years. It's very serendipitous that I'm on this episode because I just took my first full-time job at one dedicated studio. And before that, I've been working full-time, divided amongst several studios in DFW, but I just landed a job at Okratron 5000. That's a studio that does all the voice recording for Smite and Paladins, some Dragon Ball games, amongst other things. So excited to be here and excited to talk about all sorts of fun things with you guys.
That's awesome, man. All right, guys. To jump into our first discussion point around how to get your first job in visual effects, people know that VFX is a field that's brimming with demand, and they've been struggling to figure out how exactly do I get my foot in the door? How do I get my first job as a visual effects artist? And oftentimes people are telling them, start with your portfolio. But I'd love to hear from you guys. What are the do's and don'ts for making a good portfolio to submit to studios and to get your first conversation with the hiring manager?
I can jump in on that. Portfolio is great. That is going to be the thing that gets you the interview. But what I want to see in a portfolio is thoughts. Like, I don't want to see the end result of the 5 tutorials you found online. I want to see what your idea was and how that came into being and happening in your portfololo. That, to me, is a lot more interesting and tells me a lot more about you as an artist than that you can follow instructions. I mean, super good if you can follow instructions. That's going to help you, but that's not why I'm hiring someone.
Right. And I would have to say, in addition to the portfolio, because a lot of people talk about portfolio. And one thing that I also teach, I'm an adjunct professor at our community college. I teach VFX, VFX class. And one thing that I actually tell I take like a 20-minute chunk out of one of the days, out of one of the classes, and I go over portfolio and demo reels and like how to get into the industry and things like that. And one thing that I don't hear a lot of people talking about is your website, because people want to see your work. They obviously want to see your demo reel. They want to see your portfolio, but also make a clean website. If I go to your website as someone who's trying to hire you, and I have to search for 5 minutes, if I have to look for your demo reel it takes me longer than 30 seconds to find your demo reel, I'm going to move on because I have a lot to do. Like I'm very busy during my workday. And if I have to take a lot of time looking for your work, then that's going to tell me, well, this person isn't organized. They don't care about their presentation. They're not really taking this seriously. So I'm just going to move on. If I go to your website and I see your demo reel straight, bam, right there, I'm looking at it,
Some people say that you don't need a dedicated website anymore, that ArtStation is fine to be your website. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I totally agree. Our station is fine. Really, it's just if I'm looking at your resume and your application and I click on your link, and if your demo reel or your portfolio pops up and I can see great examples of your work, that's a great sign. But if I have to search through your history of why you want to get into the industry, or 10 years ago, your very first inspirational VFX movie that you saw, that's not something that really interests me at that time. Like, I'm just looking for your work so I can say this person fits the qualifications that I'm looking for. Let's give them a call.
I think the big message there is make it easy for the hiring manager to get on your stuff, whatever that stuff is. If it's the resume, like everything. And I know that can be difficult for somebody who's just starting out. I mean, you're just trying to get in. You're not a manager. How do you know what that person wants? Think like a developer, right? Send your package when you think it's ready to somebody who isn't a manager, who doesn't even work in games. Like, I don't know, pick your aunt or whatever, and send your package to that person and ask, were they able to navigate it and figure it out? If they weren't, then you probably need to simplify your access.
Yeah, as well as don't show me all of the things you can do. That might be great and to highlight other areas, but if that's not what you are specifically wanting to pursue as a career, I want to know that. And if it's not super, super, super clear in your demo reel or the first thing on your portfolio, that might be very misleading for me. So make sure you have up front and center the best of the best, whatever you would like to do, right up, easy access.
That's such a good point, though. I don't want to see everything you've done. I want to see the best you've done. One thing that I've seen quite a few times is they're trying to show their progression over the last year or 2 years or whatever. I don't care how fast you got there or whatever. I just want to see, where are you now? What am I hiring at the moment?
Totally agree with that. Along those lines, one of the things I've seen more successful people do over the years, Blizzard, is tune your demo reel presentation in some way. Just pick one thing and say, I looked at your game and I made this in the style of what I think your game is. Honestly, that's been really great as a manager to see, because if you thought you hit it and you totally didn't, you saved me a lot of time. I know you don't want to hear that.
Ouch.
But also, if you thought you hit it and you got pretty close, then I am extra interested in you. You're at the top of the pile instantly. You're like, oh, there's a person who's demonstrated they can get close to what we're trying to accomplish and they understand something about it. Honestly, at that point, you have a huge advantage.
Right. And to piggyback off of what Julian was saying, it's also good, like your studio makes a very specific art style, or they have this very specific look to their games. And then if someone who's trying to apply can hit that, it's like, wow, this person is really trying. Like, they really want to work here. That's effort. We like seeing that.
What about formatting? When it comes to adding music, is that a yay or an A? And what about sharing personal contact information on the actual demo reel, like your phone number or your email? Would you say that's be something that should be included or not?
I will be super upfront. If anyone has any kind of music or audio, I'm like, mute that as fast as I can. I don't ever listen to any kind of audio. I find it personally distracting, especially in recent reviews. It's a bunch of us hiring managers looking at a reel. And so we will be talking over that. So if there's music, we turn it off. Contact info, great. If that's a fast preferred way to contact you, like, awesome town. What I would say is be very aware of any kind of like picture of like, this is me picture, just because that can be a little bit tricky in the HR department of like, this is me, this is my face, because you would never want that to be taken into consideration as part of your portfolio. We're here to evaluate your art, not you. There could be legalities around that. So just show me the art.
Don't do what I do and try to edit the reel to the music that you picked years ago and like play an effect twice just to hit that beat because it looks cool and sounds
It's funny. Andreas would say that, like, I watch every demo reel as a manager on mute just by default. But when I am making my own demo reels, I add music just because I want to give my demo reel a rhythm. Like, it's my head thinks. I just like to have like a beat and a rhythm to my reel just so it flows better. But I totally watch everything on mute. Music doesn't matter. Like, I don't want to hear your favorite song, your playlist, you know.
I'd rather hear a voiceover, actually. If someone just said, talked over their VFX and sort of explained some things, I'm still going to turn your audio off almost immediately. But if it was there and I wanted to look at your piece again, like as a sort of director's review of their movie, like that would be interesting, because I think you could pack a lot of information in that way. I think would be difficult to deliver in another format.
Oh my gosh, Julian, you should hear a hiring manager who just reviewed my portfolio. They said I sounded so sad and that it really made them want to cry because I had a voiceover in my demo reel.
Okay, so my idea backfired. Don't sound
Perfect.
sad like you want to cry if you're going to do what I'm suggesting.
Maybe sing it. Sing along with the song you've picked.
Well, I mean, I guess this would almost fall in the category of like better to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it. Maybe a voiceover could be handy for the second time watching it, but if there's nothing there in the first place, then the visual effects have to only speak for themselves. But if you guys are just going to be music anyways, then you have the option to listen to it without any kind of ancillary sound. But if there's no sound effects or music to begin with, then if someone who did want to hear those things, maybe like, it doesn't sound like this is a deal breaker. Like if there's music that you're not going to watch the reel, you're just going to turn the music off. Going off what was Ashley's point, maybe it'd be cool to edit it to music to get a rhythm, then take the music out, but the rhythm is still there, has that still visual cadence that it's going to follow, hit those beats. Have you guys found that like certain reels might have actual sound effects specifically tailored to the visual effects that are happening? Explosion or magic or water or what have you. Has that been a thing you guys have ever seen before?
Yeah, but that's mostly when it's like clips from a game.
Yeah.
So it's just recorded from the game and it just happened to have a sound, not sound made specifically for a portfolio piece. That seems very rare.
Common question that we hear is how many effects? Should I add 3? Should I add 10 in a single reel? Should it be 1 minute? Should it be 30 seconds? What is it with the duration and the quantity?
Add only your best stuff. Don't put filler in, but I would say max time, a minute and a half, or at least my personal max time when I'm making my own reels. When I recommend it to other people, like to my students, I say about a minute and a half, because at a minute and a half, you've got a good amount of time to just put in your best stuff, and you don't feel as though, I got to fill up a 2-minute spot or I got to fill up a 2.5-minute thing. It kind of forces you just to pick only the cream of the crop, like your best work. And even if your best work is only 30 seconds, that's fine. I'd rather see 30 seconds of good VFX than, a minute and a half of good VFX and then filler.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say if we're talking about a person who's starting out, you do not have a minute and a half of content to show us. I guarantee it. If you think you do, then it's like rude awakening here. Go back and reassess. There's no way. Like, I think, as a person who's done it for as long as I have, I would be super critical. I think I would struggle to come up with a minute and a half of effects that I built that last a quarter to a half a second each, right? And it would get monotonous and boring. So I think if you look at it in those terms, it seems when you're building it, like it has to be bigger. You need to put more in. But if you haven't gotten us in 30 seconds, there's nothing you're going to add that's going to make a difference. Don't fill it with a bunch of junk.
I hired someone after seeing 3 effects total that they'd made, and they were all super high quality, and that's all I needed. So I called an interview and he was hired.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're only trying to get a phone call. You're not trying to get the job necessarily with your reel. You just need to get to that stage where a person is interested in you and wants to have a conversation. You just don't need your whole life story as a VFX artist in your reel.
Once you have the interview, your portfolio has done its job. That is gone. It might be a talking point during the interview because it's nice to talk tech and ideas and stuff, but it served its purpose by then. So it doesn't need to do more than get you that call.
One thing I really like, particularly about ArtStation, as opposed to the more traditional, like, here's my reel, is that with the thumbnails, I can parse what I'm most interested in very quickly in a portfolio. So I don't have to skip through a video and hopefully there's something in there that either demonstrates the competencies I'm looking for or is relevant to the style that I'm looking for. I am happy now that there is alternate versions to like nicely curated video. I can just watch exactly what I want from an ArtStation. So alternate perspective.
I'm so not on board with the ArtStation stuff, though. I'm super happy with having Team Taylor just deliver me a link to a YouTube clip and I can say yes or no and then send that back to HR and they can handle all the rest. I don't have the energy to browse a lot of stuff, but that's just me.
Fair, fair.
Right. Let's shift the conversation. You have now passed the portfolio phase and people have accepted you in for an interview or a phone call or just an introductionary, let's get to know each other in real time. What is some interview etiquette that we should keep in mind? And maybe let's start with prep. How can you prepare for an interview in going into it?
Well, in every interview, you're always asked at the end, so do you have any questions for us? When you're preparing, I would say write down, 3 to 5 questions before the interview, before the call. Just write them down. Say, like, what's it like working at your studio? This is a pretty good general one. What's your day to day? How's the area? If you're moving, if you're moving to another state, what's the area like? Are there dog parks close by? Things like that. Just write a couple of questions down. So when you are asked that question, you're not for like 5 minutes,
Do your research.
Yes.
I will say the number of people who've made it to an interview, phone interview, and then I ask them like sometimes the game that you're applying for. Have you played that game? We're making a sequel to it or something like that. They haven't, or they say that they have. And then of course we're going to quiz you on that. Like we're totally going to quiz you on that. And when you come up short, like I've had a person say, oh yeah, I loved the mage in D3. The mage is my favorite character. I played so much. There's no mage. You don't even know the name of the wizard, right? Like, okay, you pretty much disqualified yourself kind of as a fraud or somebody who's not actually into what we're doing. And it's so easy. Just, hey, find that company's catalog of games, spend time with them, know them a little bit, and be prepared to have a conversation around them.
But that applies to all questions though, right? Not just the studio specific. It's, I don't care what you have read online that the best answer to this question is, or what you think I want to hear. I want to hear what you actually think. When I ask you, how would you handle a situation like this? I don't want to know what the top 10 recommendations from BuzzFeed is. I want to know how you would handle it. Being honest is so important to that. I mean, if you get the question from Julian about Diablo and you don't know, tell him that you don't know. That's going to come off a lot better.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's okay to say, I don't know. Don't lie. It's like, if you don't know the answer, no, I haven't played your game before, but I'm familiar with them. I saw YouTube clips and I think you guys are great. That's a great answer.
Yeah, there's a thing that you learn as a designer, which is to not be boxed into forcing an answer you're not prepared to give. Like, this is something we teach new designers. Like, you weren't prepared for that answer. You shouldn't have, succumbed to the pressure to give it. Because it's game development. We're not doing heart surgery. Nobody cares really in game development if you have the answer in the 5 seconds after they asked it while you're making a game. And that's what we're trying to interview for, right? We want to, can you help us make the game? Nobody works like that. You're like, hey, we need to do some R&D on this. It's totally cool to say, you know what? I'm just going to say I don't know the answer, but can I follow up and email you the answer after I think about it and spend some time? That's awesome, because that is what we do on a daily basis. There's R&D and thinking and time and bouncing things off. And that just shows that you're prepared to work in the way that we work.
Yeah, I would say just give meaningful answers, not expedient ones. Because if you're just trying to think too fast on the fly, you're just going to dig yourself a hole. I love the mage. And you start questioning me about the game, but there is no mage. There's no way out of that. The amount of stock that honesty holds over just lying on the fly is I don't want to work with someone who's dishonest. And that's not going to get you anywhere far, by any means whatsoever. One of the questions that is a very common one, at least that I've heard, is what is one of your greatest weaknesses, right? What is the thing that you have to overcome? And the way I always kind of spun that answer was I'm slow to action, not because I'm a slow thinker or can't solve problems, but I'd rather get the job done correctly versus at the expense of getting the job done quickly and then done poorly at the same time. So that same philosophy about answering honest questions, or answering questions honestly, even if you don't know the answers to them, honestly saying, I don't know, that's much more important than lying and just getting into a situation that's going to be really hard to get out of.
Interview prep. I'd want every interviewer to have an understanding of what good looks like in their eyes. If they're asking me about what is the feedback culture like, I would not want to define what good looks like to me and have then their understanding of good be defined by my experiences. I would want them to have a solid understanding of what they're looking for so that you can evaluate if this place that you're interviewing at is the right place for you. Don't be swayed by everyone's answers. Make sure that you know what good looks like in your eyes first.
I know we've been living in the COVID age with online interviews. Sometimes, and hopefully soon, we can have some kind of on-site interviews, person to person. Any tips or thoughts on when it comes to what to wear or what kind of tangible, you say pants?
Yes. That's not a requirement.
Not optional.
in addition to pants, are we talking like suit pants, or can you go in khakis? Like, what are you thinking?
We're making games. I don't care. Wear a hoodie. Like, wear whatever you're comfortable in.
I would say
just look presentable.
The nicest version of what you would wear to the office anyway. Like, if you're not going to wear a suit to the office, why are you wearing a suit to the interview?
It doesn't hurt, though.
Was that?
It definitely doesn't hurt.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's weird, though.
No, it is weird. Like, if you show up to a game studio wearing a suit, like, people are going to be like, okay, why is this guy wearing a suit? Are they a lawyer? It's not going to be like, oh, he's wearing a suit, I'm not going to hire him. Just like, oh, okay, you decided to put a suit on today. Be presentable.
Don't dress in a distracting way. Don't have the person think about what you're wearing when they're trying to ask you meaningful questions.
So no clown suits.
I want to shift. I didn't include this in the prep notes, but I wanted to ask because I think it is an important part, especially no-name artists who are first getting into the industry have to overcome this big barrier, and it's the fabled art test. And I know Shannon has put up this amazing thread on the Real-Time Visual Effects forums around what should employers have for an art test. And I just wanted to hear from you guys, like, what is the thought process behind delivering and executing on a good art test to win the favor of your employers? And we'll start with Shannon since she's the one who broached the subject in the first place.
All right. Well, I mostly posed the question of what does good look like in your eyes if you are asked to do one. I, as a hiring manager, want to make sure that it's a pleasant experience, that the person understands first and foremost why the company is asking for an art test, because it can be a very contentious thing. It is sometimes perceived as work for the company that's unpaid, that like it can be a very unfair experience, especially if you've had a bad experience. So the intention of the thread, which was much more around wanting to design around what good looks like. Some of my takeaways from that thread were just make sure that the studio is very upfront with what they are looking for, potentially broach the topic of paid art tests, and make sure that the individual is understanding and aligned with, again, what you are looking for as a company from the art test, so that there's no reservations about doing that, and that it's not a gigantic time sink. It should be a short, concise thing where the person understands exactly what you're looking for and the time around that, how long it should take, all of that good info, so that there's no guesswork, because it can feel so bad if you spend a bunch of time as the individual doing an art test, doing the feedback loop, whatever that looks like for the company. And then the company comes back with like, sorry, nope. Maybe that is the end result, but making sure that that person comes away with, oh, this was a shit experience, has some learnings and takeaways to say like, hey, here's what we are looking for. Here's where it didn't align what we're looking for in the future. Want to keep in touch, like all that good stuff. Just because someone didn't pass an art test doesn't mean they're not an amazing candidate or a potential candidate for the future.
Yeah, I would also say if you do take an art test and it's not accepted, it's okay, at least in my eyes, to ask for feedback on the art test. Like respond, like give a reply. It's like, well, what didn't you like about it? Are there ways that I can improve? Because me, like personally, as someone who's taken and given art tests, I will always give feedback if someone asks for it. They say, hey, you weren't at our qualified level this time, but here's some improvements you could do on your demo reel or your art test, and apply later, maybe in 6 months. Once you think you're more qualified, apply again. Apply the feedback that I've given you and then, reapply.
Those who have administered art tests, and for the people who took those tests and it did not go in their favor, how often do you see like the same person doing that test again months down the road after they locked and reloaded and came back? And did you notice like marked improvements at all? Or is that like, do you find there's a lot of people who don't like swallow the defeat and move on? Or what do you guys think about that? Maybe come back and shoot again. Is that common, I guess?
I've seen a few.
Okay, but it's not as common.
I've not seen that, but I think that this actually touches on I think there's a reason for it. Sometimes when you're working at a studio that people, it's their dream job. They think that the one time that they applied was their one shot and they're done for a long, long time. And then they don't actually ever reapply. They're like, oh, that's it. I'm never going to be at Blizzard. No, you could just keep reapplying. There's obviously a time frequency where we're not going to send you another art test. If you just applied 3 months ago, I don't expect you grew that much. So we're probably going to use your previous art test and pass it around. But that said, I think the bigger problem is people just seem to give up and think that their life is over or whatever, No, that's not how it works. It's just a shot. It's not a permanent thing. Just keep going.
If you have an art test, it should test something specific. If you get another art test later down the line, hopefully it's not testing the exact same thing. So it's not just a carbon copy, because the art test is supposed to tell the company something that they couldn't get out of your portfolio or the interview and that sort of of thing. So if they're testing the exact same thing for you again, either it's a shitty art test, that is also happening, or you haven't grown.
A question that may come up is if you are applying for a job at a particular company and you just happen to know the hiring manager, is it okay or not okay to circumvent the HR application process and to contact the hiring manager directly? Let's say I wanted to work at Gearbox. Instead of filling out, an online app and going through the official channels, can I just call Ashley and get him to set up an interview and get him to get me a job? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, don't do that, because it wouldn't, like, first of all, like, it wouldn't, at least from my experience, like, it wouldn't work that way anyways, because at least I know that I would not be able to set up an interview with you. So you'd have to go through HR anyways. Like, I have been contacted in the past by people saying, hey, I'd like a job. Give me a job. I can't do that. I'm not the hiring manager.
Why not?
That's not that's not
Come
me.
on.
It's like, yeah, just show up. Cool. Well, show up at the front desk.
I mean, it's fine to ping someone and ask, hey, what do you think of my stuff? I will never be able to set up an interview. I won't even be able to take down your contact stuff because of GDPR in Europe. So it has to go through the correct system. So it's stored, legal way and all of that. But I mean, if you pass me a reel that looks good, I can tell the HR people saying, hey, this is an application that's coming in. Let's have a look at that one sooner. You can ping it, but don't expect me to just, yeah, that's good. You start Monday. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. Like Andreas said, if you want to ping someone and say, hey, man, here's my reel. What do you think? It's like, yeah, I can recommend you. Like, hey, I should totally apply. But you have to go through HR just so it can be tracked.
All right. I want to move into the last part of this discussion. You go through the interview and they love you. You pass the art test and they want to hire you and they bring you into the company. Woohoo! So what is good etiquette for onboarding into the culture? What are some tips you have for helping new people to feel welcome? And for somebody who's coming into there, how should I act around new people I don't really know? What are your thoughts?
And what's worked for me is ask a lot of questions, over communicate. If you under communicate, then you're likely going to mess up and you're going to get burned and get scolded for that. But if you over communicate, I've never been in trouble for like asking too many questions and being exactly particular about what it is that you want precisely. That's always been a thing that's helped me more. Like I have yet to hit the ceiling of over communicating and been told this is too much, you're overbearing. That has not happened to me yet so far. Be honest, ask a lot of questions if you don't know, and just know exactly what it is that they want. Don't try to be a hero and impress them if you don't know what it is that you're being asked to do.
If it's your first job, realize that it's okay to be overwhelmed. It happens to everyone. It's fine to not know things because the first year at a studio, you're going to learn more than you've learned so far. I don't care how long you've been studying.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. Not too commonly, I will see somebody who is still interviewing effectively. And what I mean by that is they're still trying to convince everybody that they should be hired even after they got the job. They're trying to prove themselves. It's like, you got the job. You don't need to do that anymore. Actually kind of switch to just being a sponge. Stop trying to convince us that you were worth hiring. You do a better job of that just by trying to cope with the avalanche of information. The other one is, I think if you do get into a larger studio, or I'll say it like this, not even larger. Let's imagine you picked what was your favorite. This was my end goal studio. I applied and I got the job case. Be prepared to reconcile your fantasy of what you thought it was going to be like with what it's actually like. I find that people can really struggle if they've built a studio up in their mind as being operating a certain way. Like if I use my own company as an example, the typical fantasy that people have is that it's a perfectionist utopia and I'm going to be able to sit and polish my work forever because Blizzard takes 10 years to ship anything kind of thing, right? So
while
that's
wearing armor.
There. Right? That's my fantasy. This is going to be great. And then, no, it's the opposite. We're going to make you do it 10 times. And none of them are going to be the way you thought it was going to be. That can be a massive change for somebody to cope with. And so you can't prepare for those changes, but you can be prepared to just go through them and expect that whatever you thought it was going to be like, it almost surely isn't going to be that way.
I love that he's addressing that point. So the job I have now, the interview process that I did was pretty informal. The job prior to that, it was the very formal, hit all the right avenues, email your stuff off, get called in for the interview and do everything. I actually knew one of the guys interviewing for that job. And essentially the same reasons why I didn't get hired at that job, the reason why I did get hired at the job I'm at now was I wanted to do too many many things for the other studio. It was very assembly line. They expected you to kind of do your work and everybody does their job, at least ADR dubbing studio. So at that studio that I didn't get hired at, the writers write, the engineers engineer, the directors direct, and the only double dipping that's allowed is a little bit of voiceover. And if you've been there for like 10 years, then directors can do some writing. But other than that, you're expected to stay in your box and do what you're supposed to do. And the studio I'm at now, I'm doing everything. I'm doing post mixing, I'm doing prelay recording, I'm doing ADR, I'm doing some writing, some directing, I'm doing literally everything. And it pays better and I couldn't be happier. But like I was very honest about what I wanted to do at the previous interview. And I've had some discussions with my friends who work at the studio. They don't think I would have been happy working there. So it's important to temper those expectations. Don't answer questions to an interview to get a job for a studio. Basically, if you have to be someone else to get the job, then you're going to be masquerading as someone who you're not at the job, and you're not going to be happy and it's not going to work out. And that's just not a good recipe for success.
Yeah. Authenticity, be your true self for sure is such an important aspect of coming to work, and having it be an environment in which you can be your true self is so important for your overall well-being and happiness. If you do catch yourself being, like Julian said, putting on your interview hat, or, like Spencer was saying, masquerading as someone you're not, I can guarantee there'll come a time where you realize that you aren't happy because you're not able to bring your true self to your work environment. Really evaluate that. And again, use the interview to kind of discern if this is going to be the place for you. What do their workflows look like? What does the feedback look like? What is the culture? And make sure that is the place that you want to actually be.
But also realize that you might not know where you want to work or what sort of place you want to work at. Just because a place makes the games that you like to play doesn't mean that they work the way you want to do. It's not over when you get the job. Okay, well, it wasn't what I wanted. I guess this is my life now. Most places have probation periods, and those go both ways. You don't have to stay at a place you don't like. Figure out where you want to go when you actually have the information.
If the offer is made, then you do have a choice. No is an answer. And if it's not a place you want to work, then even though it might be every single ounce in your body might say, I've been trying to get a job for such a long period of time, I have to take this job. Realize that no is an answer. You have that option. For the first time in that process, you'll have leverage, and that can be overwhelming, but just sit on it. It's okay to ask for time to think about it. In my experience, I'm not familiar with, again, the exact visual effects workflow and what's expected for turnaround times, but say it's
instant replies only, nothing else.
Make a decision right now. That's it. No going back. Axiomatic.
This offer will self-detonate in 5, 4.
Yeah, I would also say if it's your first job in the industry and you're on your first day, especially if you're like right out of college or grad school, leave your ego at the door. Because you might have been big shot in your class coming out of school, but once you step foot in that door, you're working with professionals that have been doing it for years. So absorb everything they teach you, listen, ask questions, as everyone was saying, but also leave your ego, because if you come in thinking you know everything, you're not going to stay in that studio very long.
Except the fact that the first job that you're going to get is probably not going to be your dream job. I can almost guarantee that. I worked at, I think, 5 different studios before I got to the one I'm at now. I enjoyed parts of those different studios, but there's a reason why the one I'm at now is not the one I started out at, because I have to work my way up.
So let's kind of talk on the dark side for a quick moment. What are some red flags that you should keep an eye out for when joining a company and realize that this is not the best work culture to be a part of? When
you join on the first day and someone pulls you aside and starts telling you secrets and stuff. You see a lot of that. Like you start getting, as a manager, what I like to think of my team as having a negative or positive spin. And I know that spin is like a PR word, and I don't mean it like that. I mean, what's the orientation? Are people like plussing each other, or are they dragging each other down? And when you see that dragging each other down and secret sharing and conversations in a corner and like lowering their voice and like that kind of culture of secrecy, that's a red flag that there's something not right. It might be with that one person, so I wouldn't necessarily overreact. I would keep my ears open. I would start to want to just sort of sit back a little bit and try to get a lay of the land of what's really happening there.
I would say a good red flag, and this is something I experienced very early on in my career, almost like basically like one of my first jobs is are you made to feel guilty for leaving on time? If you're working a 9 to 5, hey, it's 5 o'clock, I'm going home, and people looking around like, oh really, you're leaving? Yeah, the workday's done. So especially if your manager's doing it, so that is that was looking back, huge red flag. But since I was first time working, I just didn't realize it.
Completely agree with that. When you're coming in without any experience, it's easy to fall into, well, I guess this is how it's actually done. That's not how it has to be done. That's how it's done at some places, but yeah, that's not supposed to be the norm.
Guys, we are closing up this roundtable. I have one last question I wanted to ask. Everybody works at a studio in this room, even Spencer, even though Spencer, you're fairly new in that environment. If you had one single piece of advice to somebody applying to your studio, what would that be?
For me, it would be don't apply with the results of my tutorials. I've seen that way too much, and please stop doing that.
I've seen that too with your tutorials.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's like going on The Voice and then singing the song of one of the judges trying to get in. Like,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, not a good way to do it.
Unless you really knock it out of the park.
I think for me, it could be a thousand things we could talk about, but I'm just going to pick one arbitrarily, which is understand something about whatever studio it is, what their big points are. You can usually find that by visiting their website and just looking at who do they say they are. And so in the case of Blizzard, we're super gameplay focused. Our number one core value is gameplay first. We live that. It's going to be there all the time. It's not going to go away. And we're going to be testing for that the whole way through. And you should expect that it's going to override a lot of your art decisions sometimes, right? Like that's our big value. And that's us, and every studio is going to have their thing. And I think just going in and understanding that, believe them, when they say what they are and who they are, and expect that to affect your process and affect your work, and to have to really adapt to that.
For us, just be familiar with our games and our art style, because at Gearbox, we do have a very specific art style approach to our games and the visual aspects of things. So just be familiar with it, and you'll have an understanding of, Borderlands is not cel shaded,
Yeah, honestly, just plus one to that. It is so important, especially when reviewing a lot of candidate portfolios of we know what we're looking for. And so if Riot is the place that you see yourself, knowing what we're looking for ahead of time is so incredibly valuable. It saves me a lot of time, makes sure that you are aware of the content that we're looking for and the content that you're excited about creating for the next X amount of years. So super important.
Looking at the Discord, I think everyone sees Riot as the place to be. So many spells.
Oh, that's great.
For you, maybe.
Oh, baby.
Be honest about what it is that you want. Like, if the philosophy of the work culture that is being described to you just has absolutely no overlap with the philosophy of how you get work done, it's not going to be a good fit. You will be shocked at how fast you went out of a job that you don't like, even if you thought that that job was paramount to accept in the first place. So just be honest. That's going to be so much better. And a big part of it is like, just, I don't know how to say this in a way that's palpable for advice, but like, just be someone that people want to work with. Like, I mean, to say it simply, don't be a dick. Like, people who are talented but are so hard to work with, that hurts them so much more than people who have so much capability within them to grow into something that a hiring manager might see as someone that they could throw a lot of work at, right? And if I get along with someone who has potential versus someone who's already there, but I really don't get along with that person, don't think the person that has more experience is going to get the job because I didn't like the way they handled themselves, right? Like, just being someone who gets along with people is a big part of it too. But that's like more personal and philosophical, and
reputation travels.
Yeah, it's still a small industry.
Mm-hmm.
And VFX is even smaller within that.
Unlike everybody else in this room, I am still a free agent. Recently, one of my amazing mentors had told me that as I was facing imposter syndrome, wondering, I don't know if I'm really meant for this. Is it natural talent or is it something you can really learn? And she said, 1% a day is better than 0%. And I think that goes a long way, even in your job hunt. So even hearing back from a studio is better than not hearing anything back. So keep on applying, everybody. The jobs are there. All you have to do is try. The last thing I want to touch base before we wrap this up is I just want to thank our guest for coming on today. It's been super awesome listening to all of your experiences and advice for people trying to get into the industry, specifically for visual effects. I just want to do a round and ask if anybody wants to do a quick shout out about any projects, any things or people that they want to promote, starting with Andreas.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm loving Embark. So if other people want to join me in having fun, we are hiring. Like, we need VFX people. Everyone needs VFX people, but come to us first.
Julian.
Well, yeah, we need VFX people.
No, we claim them.
We've got a website for that. But we have a lot of things going on. There's stuff that we haven't talked about that's happening in the background. And then, of course, there's the stuff you know about, with Diablo 2 Resurrected and Diablo Immortal. Those are like in technical alphas that we speak. So there is a lot happening. I think I'm saying this because I think Blizzard tends to be a very opaque company. Like a lot of companies, we have our secrets, and it can feel sometimes like you just don't hear from us and you don't know what's happening, but there's a lot happening. So, and don't be afraid to apply to us. We're just a game studio, really.
So I'll say, Julian, I reached out to Sarah Cambody about this, but when you fill out an application, you can only fill out one, and a year goes by and it says, oh, we still have your old application on board. So it's really hard to reapply through their like HR logistics system. I don't know if other people experience that.
That can be a case where reaching out to a manager and poking them and saying exactly what you just said. I'm interested, but this is how your thing works, and I'm just poking you on that. I think that can be okay way to try to reinvigorate, because we do actually share. You don't know this because we don't say it. When people submit and their stuff doesn't work out for one team, it does get repurposed and shared. Especially in VFX, where there's just not enough people. You're foolish as a company if you're just throwing anybody's application in the waste bin. We don't do that. Those are all potential future hires. So it does happen, but yeah, I know it can feel really opaque. I apologize for that.
I love how you use opaque, because we see that in our material editor all the time with Unreal. Do we do translucent or opaque? And Shannon, what about you?
Additive hiring.
Yeah, gosh, it's not a surprise based on what everyone else is saying is that, yep, I mean, I am the VFX lead for R&D. And so spoilers, there's really awesome up and coming stuff. So I'm always on the hunt for effects talent, not to like jump in the pile of like, but please more people. Yeah, Riot's always hiring, looking for more VFX buddies. Please apply. Come talk to me.
Ashley?
Yeah, same. We are hiring too. Also, shout out to our VFX team. I love you guys. You're awesome if you're listening. But yeah, Gearbox is hiring VFX artists of all levels, all skill levels. So send your application our way too.
Spencer, you got any final thoughts?
Watch dubbed anime. That supports my business. It's not as bad as people think it is. No, I'm just kidding. But just be yourself. Be honest. All these people here, like, we had a very cordial, fun conversation. And like, there's no person here that I wouldn't have gotten along with. Talking formally or in the work environment. I hope the advice we give you was helpful. And yeah, watch dubbed anime and consume more controlling content. So play Smite, play Paladins and other stuff. That'll keep my job going. So that'd be awesome. Please do that.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for coming on the show today. It's been a real pleasure.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.